I almost don't quite know how to respond because I don't know what you're doing.
Okay, would you like an explanation?
Yes?
Okay. Essentially, the story is we're three people trapped in a place surrounding the last bit of nourishment in here at all. And what we're doing is representing the three different points of view of why the one person deserves that piece over the other one. And it's more or less representative of how people can go from being courteous to animalistic once like primal things are needed. But the in-between details and the transitions of it still need to be scripted out. What we did first was just put down our monologues, like our basic pieces for each, and kind of develop things around it.
Okay, I think that's a great direction to go in. I responded very positively to that first image of you holding the spoons up and stuff. I couldn't hear almost anything you said when you were reading. Anybody? Was that thing that played on the tape, was that to be on a sound system?
Yes, that's going to be on a sound system. These were mostly just placeholders for like a better quality version of what they were.
What do you need? What's happening? Why do you conceptually need that sound system thing if you're three people in a space trapped who are, like, what does that do?
It has more like narration to it. It kind of just sinks. It kind of like, because our scene doesn't start necessarily when this action has started. It starts like we've been in this place for a while, and we've clearly like this piece of food in the middle has clearly been what we've all been thinking about for a while, to the point where we start in that where we have knives at our throats. So that kind of more or less like catches people up and puts them to speed on what's going on.
Okay.
The situation.
So that audio is kind of a narrative of what you've just seen, what that tableau was about.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it for you?
No, that's okay. Let's talk about the rest of the piece first.
Just
I'm
to,
thinking about a conception.
yeah, well, the feedback in terms of what's legible or what's audible, I also couldn't hear very much of the text, but I think no matter what, we're not going to hear all of what's said in the beginning if there's that many voices. So if it's important that we know that, then I think you should break it up differently.
Yeah, why not have the voiceover be while you're holding the knives up?
Okay.
Right, over
Well,
a tableau
you're
or
still, and you're
movement.
just in that shape, which is interesting to look at anyway. Then we hear whatever exposition you want us to hear, and then you launch into the other stuff.
I have a question. What is the metronome
Yeah.
for, or does it stand for anything? Or
I guess with this being like a workshop station, we'll like reveal to you what we don't necessarily want to reveal fully to the audience, but if you
Kind of like, live and just the rhythm of like a heartbeat.
Yeah, it's more or less mimics the rhythm of a heartbeat.
Unfortunately for me, because the metronome is there, then the fact that the rhythms are not really very rigorously, synchronized or performed, it just becomes muddled.
So
Yeah, it makes it hard to use.
with the rhythms being synchronized and formed, though, would you think that would be effective, or do you still think that even with that, the metronome, that would be?
I guess here's the thing. I'm not against this non-diegetic sound, like the sound of a metronome or this voiceover or whatever. But I'm still struggling to figure out is what you guys are doing when you're on stage. I understand now the tableau that you've described or the situation, but it's not really being communicated in that piece you just showed. Not to say that you can't keep working on it or whatever else. So I think I would not have a problem with the non-diegetic sounds like the voiceover or the metronome if I understood physically what you were doing with each other. Right now you're just sort of sitting in chairs like this. It's not very evocative, and so then it becomes confusing. If it's a situation where the three of you are stuck in a space, then we should see that in your bodies. It should be about being stuck in a space. You should see the sort of dismay or like the length of time you've been there, or like bring that physically into the moment a little bit more.
Like looking disheveled or something.
What?
You mean like he's looking disheveled?
Disheveled or just abject, I guess. It doesn't even have to be dishevelment. It could be abjection somehow.
I think that there could also though be an abstraction of the whole world, the whole scenario. And I think what is strongest might be what you might want to really highlight and reinforce. And to me, that was the running rhythm. So my thoughts are, in place of what was hard to decipher as a voiceover, what if that began a series of beats, a heartbeat-based thing, you know, and then there's also the metronomic beat. I was really pulled into the beat aspect of the entire piece, especially when you started in the moments when you were in sync with what was being metronomically delivered. The sort of almost musicality of that beat, the playing that began in sync with the overall beating, and then the reading that came into play. So in my head I was thinking, what if you really reinforced the idea of a strictly musical, very tight rhythmic piece that included the reading? Because you've got so much rhyme involved in your pieces that could be very interesting as a challenge in and of itself. I would be pulled into that. That for me was the strongest section of this piece, even minus the fighting that came afterwards. Make your 3 arguments for why you are each deserving, you know, in time, in tight time.
So maybe it's like a concert setup as opposed to this fictive world that you're creating. Like the piece is about the fictive world, but you're not trying to necessarily evoke it here. That it's more you have a concert type piece that you're doing, and all the meaning is in the text. And so you focus on getting the rhythms right and being able to hear the words of the stuff. And
yeah, right, and revising, continuing to revise the writing so it really fits into a very deliberate rhythmic scheme. You know, that being your music. I love the fact that additional beats were being created with eating utensils, and I love what I think it was Darren said about, we are 3 people who each deserve the last bit. I think if you use an opening line like that and then just launch into a rhythm and create a whole, you know, rhythm section.
So we don't need to know this whole story about being stuck in a existential. It's just an existential reality or whatever. I agree with what Sherry's saying, but I do think, like, for example, by the time it got around to Sid, the melodies of the readings that you guys were doing, it was like the same for everybody. La 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 la. Every line went down. Every single thing you said went down at the end. And so, you know, if you make it as a composition, you have to really attend to the dynamic and the melodic, what we're hearing in your reading, making sure that you vary it up and give it a shape, and, you know, each person has something to add.
And think what could happen if at a certain point you're speaking in unison, even if it's a couple of lines. We are 3 people who each deserve the last bit. But varying up the rhythm, you know, it could be like a kind of rhythmic harmony, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
And then maybe you could return to that initial tableau. Like, I just got this image in my mind, so you don't have to use it, and it might not be right. But if you're each doing the lines and you're sitting around this plinth with a plate on it and so on, and then every once in a while you all grab up your spoons and you're back at each other, and then you go back into the piece and whatever, like, maybe that as a recurring visual motif. It doesn't have to go any further than that or be anything more than that. It all is communicated in that moment, and it's fun to look at. I mean, I enjoy that.
And it's
image.
cool to hear when it starts to cook. And so the way to practice that with each of your pieces of text would be to get that metronomic beat down. I think it needed to be a bit faster. It seemed slow, or your reading was fast, but something was out of sync with the metronome. So really finding the exact beat, and then knowing what that is, each of you, and going back to your writing and working on the beats of each syllable in the lines as they work according to the rhythm, and sussing out your parts that way.
Yeah, so thinking of it as a piece of music, yeah.
I thought that the piece really came alive at the fight. Like, I was kind of clouded, and I thought that it really was like, it was a nice change of pace. I liked that sort of idea of it sort of erupting.
Yeah.
But I was almost thinking, even with that metronome, like, because it is a metronome, I hear it as a clock. Like, because you guys are sitting in that room and like addressing me, will someone turn that fucking clock off? We're not leaving anytime soon. I don't need to know what time it is. You know, whatever the case may be, like, maybe that as an avenue for addressing what's going on. But you know, that might not make sense either.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I thought when you guys stood up and started moving around, I couldn't understand what was going on. You were speaking up stage, there was like little mutterings and things, and it was like a mush. Like, to me, it lost all focus at that point. That's
Yeah,
just me.
That was
Yeah.
more like, we're still piecing together, so we ourselves didn't even know what
Right.
we were doing.
I
That
think
second
also,
half will incorporate some movement, some blocking, some choreographed fight scenes.
Right.
I think it'd be kind of neat if you got really loud, like if you all spread apart even and got loud as you walked towards the thing in the center.
I would focus on simple movements like that, like everybody holding the thing up, or walking away and then walking towards, like things that are really, really repeatable for everybody, very simple, nothing fancy. Because
yeah, because it
if
really
it's
got
more
into like,
refined,
yeah, at the end it felt like this is an extremely rough draft of an entire play. And like you need to like write the play and like edit the play and like block it and memorize everything and like react. Like I just didn't feel like you have enough time for that. So I mean, I do have to say like that because it was hard. It's hard to judge because I understood so little of the text throughout. But the part at the end, because of the action stuff, I finally started to understand what was happening. And at the beginning, I didn't really get that it was the same. I mean, looking back on the beginning, I'm just like, well, I guess I just couldn't hear enough of what was going on. But I think that poetically, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a formal shift at some point where it goes from being these sort of disembodied monologues into being like spoon to the throat.
but they don't have to be disembodied if you engage with the idea of longing for the food and abjection. So Alex, and then I would like to give a direct vote.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, like how you said, like if you break up the text, like someone's talking and then one person's like sneaking up to like the plate, and then they all go with the spoon, you know, like if it is like a fight